Hello everyone, my name is Slade, I'll be your host, and welcome to Star Wars Did You Know? Many of us are familiar with the Zelo Beast, these massive, nearly 100-meter tall monstrosities that once terrified the Dugs of Malastare. But what if I were to tell you that in Star Wars there are other reptilian monstrosities that are even larger, that in fact dwarf the Zelo Beast, and rival the size of some starships? These massive creatures would be the Star Dragons, also known as the Dunuogwuin. Not much is truly known for certain about the Dunuogwuin. This is due to their mysterious and somewhat secretive race. In fact, they're practically legends among many spacers, as they're relatively rare in the galaxy. However, what is known for sure is their appearance, which could vary between individuals. Generally, however, they were large, serpentine creatures that had heavily segmented bodies. Each segment of that body contained a set of legs. As well, they had diaphanous wings upon their backs. They were covered from their heads to the tips of their tail in scales that could range in color from grays to pale blues to blacks, and a myriad of colors in between. The length of the individual could vary wildly. While the average length across the species appeared to be 10 meters, there were observed examples of individuals that could be up to 100 meters long. In some extreme cases, there were claims that 1,000 to 3,000 meter long individuals had been observed, although, as with much of the Dunuogwuin's nature, this was highly speculative and not necessarily confirmed. Given the amount of knowledge available about the Dunuogwuin, that is, not very much at all, much of their internal biology was highly speculative. It was believed by many xenobiologists that the internal organs of the star dragons were able to produce some sort of natural repulsor field, although whether this was a collection of all the organs or a single organ is unknown. In addition, the dragons seemed to be able to create some sort of internal cold fusion, which they could then use to breathe a superheated gas which could melt the hulls of starships even in the vacuum of space. Other observed abilities of the star dragons included a very high regenerative rate, with the species being able to recover from damage inflicted by turbolasers. In addition to this, they were capable of natural hyperspace travel, similar to the Purgale, although there is no connection biologically between the two that can be made at this point. As you might have already guessed, the species as a whole was able to survive in vacuum. Whether they needed to breathe oxygen as many other species did or some other sort of gas is unclear, or if they merely held their breath while transiting in between planets. The lifespan of the Dunuogwuin was perhaps one of the most astonishing in the galaxy, with some individuals living as long as 6,000 years, meaning that a Dunuogwuin alive during the time of the Clone Wars might be old enough to remember the Great Sith War 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Much of the reason why so little is known about the Dunuogwuin is because the Star Dragons were highly secretive, as already mentioned, and never gave their bodies up to science. When a Star Dragon reached the end of their life, they would travel to a place called the Graveyard of the Dragons. The location of this site wasn't entirely clear. However, it was rumored to be on the planet Zuquaris, which was possibly the Star Dragon's homeworld. However, the Dunuogwuin never confirmed this, and the planet itself remained uncharted, located on the outskirts of the Outer Rim territories, although it is rumored that Emperor Palpatine had a storehouse on the planet. Why the Dunuogwuin would allow him to do so is up to speculation. Dunuogwuin were observed to only have a single sex, apparently being hermaphroditic in nature. However, two individuals were required to mate, and that mating process was completely unknown outside of the species. What is known is that most Dunuogwuin offspring were unintelligent and largely feral monsters that the parents often had to put down for the safety of the galaxy at large. Those rare individuals that showed intelligence oftentimes showed a penchant for cruelty and cunning that was not entirely welcome within Dunuogwuin society. Given the likelihood that their offspring would either be unintelligent and feral, or even actively malicious and evil, mating between the Dunuogwuin was incredibly rare. However, it is speculated that some species in the galaxy at large were the result of sympathetic Dunuogwuin parents not being willing to kill their unintelligent offspring. Examples of this would include the greater krayt dragon on Tatooine, that are possibly descendants of feral star dragons left to their own devices on the planet. In addition, it's also possible that the Kadri Ra of Arapia were also descendants of star dragons, with their lifespans of 1,000 to 1,500 years, ability to survive in a vacuum for a limited time, and their lengths of up to 200 meters. It isn't entirely impossible that this species could, in fact, be descendants of star dragons as well. First contact between the star dragons and the Old Republic came in 15,000 BBY, and would prove to be disastrous. It is unclear exactly what transpired between the Republic ships and the Star Dragons when they first encountered one another. However, a collection of scout craft sent out by the Republic to map the Outer Rim territories would encounter several Star Dragons, and after a brief exchange of fire between the two sides, the scouts would retreat, jumping all the way back to Coruscant. Thinking they were safe, and merely assuming that they had encountered some sort of hostile life form, they were not prepared for what happened next. Star Dragons appeared in orbit of Coruscant and assaulted the planet, devastating it and wiping aside Republic defenses. Peace would eventually be negotiated between the Republic and the Star Dragons by Supreme Chancellor Felorian and the Star Dragon Bors Mat-O, a Dunuogwuin philosopher. A statue would be erected of the two individuals on Coruscant to commemorate the peace, and it would stand there for thousands of years, although it isn't entirely clear how long it lasted and if it was still present by the time of the Empire. Following its initial encounter with the collective galaxy, the Dunuogwuin would be largely peaceful, it appears, with no other major incidents between them and any other species being documented. However, it is interesting to note that roughly 1/3 of the species was Force-sensitive, and several individuals would serve as Jedi throughout the millennia leading up to the Galactic Empire. During the Clone Wars, the Dunuogwuin would remain neutral, refusing to take a side with either the Separatists or the Old Republic, and when the Galactic Empire rose to power, the Dunuogwuin would again remain neutral, adamantly denying that any of their kin had ever been Jedi, or that the Empire had any reason to bother them. And this may be why the Dunuogwuin allowed Emperor Palpatine to have a storehouse on Zuquaris, their potential homeworld, in a bid to perhaps placate the Empire and keep them from waging a war against the species. While there are several named individuals within the Dunuogwuin species, such as the already mentioned Bors Mat-O, the Dunuogwuin philosopher who helped negotiate peace between the Old Republic and the Dunuogwuin species during their first encounter around 15,000 BBY, the majority of the species is unnamed, with only a few individuals noted, such as Jedi Master Duinuogwuin, who served as a living escort for a Jedi Praxium ship before helping to found the Taian Praximen on the planet Taia-4, and served as a guardian of the Cave of Truth for about 600 years, this being from about 4,600 years before the Battle of Yavin to roughly 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. And then there is my personal favorite, the individual known as Starwing. This individual was said to be a relatively young and curious star dragon. It was about 80 meters long, with a silver underbelly and pale blue back. During its exploration of the galaxy, it nearly suffocated while traveling between planets. However, fortunately, it stumbled across a group of rebels, and it was able to use its latent force abilities to communicate with them and explain that it needed oxygen or it would die. It's unclear exactly what the rebel ships thought of this creature they had stumbled across, however they did consent to help it, giving Starwing the oxygen it needed to survive. It's interesting to note, by the way, that Starwing is referred to as a he, and it is unclear if that is because Starwing was in fact a male, or if it was simply a matter of the rebels assuming the gender of the species they were interacting with. However, it should be noted that Duinuogwuin was also said to be male, so it is quite possible that the single sex that the Dunuogwuin had as a whole was in fact male, and the male was able to both produce eggs and sperm, or whatever other mating mechanism was used to produce offspring. Regardless of this potential Star Dragon faux pas, the rebels did in fact save Starwing's life, providing him with the nourishment he needed to continue on his exploration of the galaxy. And they too would continue on with their own mission, thinking perhaps that was the last they'd see of the young Star Dragon. However, Starwing seemed to think that he owed the rebels a debt of gratitude, turning up again when the rebels were under attack from a group of pirates, and using his superheated breath to destroy the pirate command ship, thus saving the rebels, who had in turn saved his own life, before again going on his own way back out into the galaxy. And so it seems to go with the Star Dragons. The Dunuogwuin as a whole seem to prefer to remain neutral, but individuals can be as destructive as the Zelo Beast, if not even more so, but also as benevolent as Duinuogwuin and Starwing, who helped individuals they felt deserved that help. Whether this is indicative of the entirety of the species is unknown. Much remains a mystery with the Dunuogwuin. As their name might suggest, with the galaxy at large referring to them as Star Dragons, perhaps there always will be a certain level of mysticism and legend associated with this enigmatic species. Alright everyone, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. There'll be more content coming. If you've got any questions or comments, by all means leave them and I'll be responding to them shortly. Until next time, this is your host Slade, and this has been Star Wars Did You Know?